check back.
I guess we didn't have finance in December, did we? Did we? Huh. Maybe I was missing my notebook. Oh, I did.
It was like the last meeting before we stopped having meetings.
Good evening and welcome to the City Council Finance Committee meeting of Thursday, January 16th, 2025. 3 items on the agenda. The first of these is discussion regarding the mid-year budget review.
Totally up to you, but I think a lot more people are here about this if you wanted to change the order.
I'd be happy to change the order.
Surprise.
Most of right. It had Jason's in it.
He's good.
We'll go to item 2 first, which is discussion regarding the condition and ownership of the Whittier and Irving Recreation Centers. Who's presenting for that? Jason?
I think Rick is.
Sure.
All right. On the issue of the transfer of the Whittier and Irving Recreation Centers, a little bit of background with regard to our process is those facilities were constructed with bond funds in the amount of $750,000 approved by the electorate on May 28, 1974. So it's been about 26 years since those funds were approved for purchase and construction of those facilities. One is at Whittier and the other one is at Irving. We use those centers for youth sports, after-school programs, and summer camps over the years. Our primary junior jammer games were at Whittier and Irving, and then we had some volleyball for girls and things along those lines. We have an after-school program, and then we have a summer camp at those locations. The youth sports that we were providing at those locations have now been moved to the YFAC. So we're no longer doing junior jammer basketball or volleyball or any sports at those facilities. Those have all moved to the YFAC. The after-school programs and summer camps operated at those locations, and I thought I finished that sentence, but apparently I didn't save it. The way that those facilities, because our programs are done in conjunction with DHS, we're not allowed to have anybody other than camp participants, their parents, and our employees in the building while those camps are going on. So we were talking about it the other day about the concept of, we used to allow like recreational basketball in the gymnasiums, but now we don't do that anymore because those summer camps, again, because they're regulated by DHS, do not allow other people not associated with the programs to be in the building while those camps are going on. So in terms of even if we were to open them for recreational sports, I think Jason told me nobody can be in there for recreational sports during the school day because they're directly connected to both Whittier and Irving schools. And then after school, from about 3 maybe to 6 would be the only time people could go and play recreational basketball. But again, for the most part, that's not occurring anymore. And then of course during the summer, they're not allowed to be in there because of the DHS regulations. Norman Public Schools uses those centers for assemblies, plays, performances, physical education, and basketball games. So they are the primary users of those facilities currently with regard to those activities during the school year. All right, property transfer law. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, and it really has to do with how a particular public entity holds property. You can hold property for a corporate use, or you can hold property for the benefit of the public for a public use. Property held for a corporate use can be alienated. You can sell it. There are no issues with regard to a municipality selling property that it uses for a corporate use. For example, this building is primarily used for corporate use. And if at some point in time council thought they wanted to sell it, it probably wouldn't be difficult to do that under the current state of Oklahoma law regarding property transfer. Property delegated to the municipality in trust for the public cannot be alienated without special legislative authority unless the public use has been abandoned or the property has become unsuited for continued use. Think about that. A lot of the cases, in this particular case, which is a 2021 Oklahoma Supreme Court case, was about the sale of 8.8 acres of parkland. And the municipality wanted to sell it to a private developer, and the court said, nope, you can't do that. You're holding this in trust for the public. And as a result of that, unless there's special legislative authority, which for this particular case there wasn't, or unless the public use has been abandoned or the property become unsuited for continued use as a park. Now, in that particular case, there was a bit of a dispute of fact because the lease that the Tulsa Facilities Authority gave to the private developer was entered first. And then sometime thereafter, there was a declaration by the city or the public authority that, oh yeah, we've abandoned this. And the court said, well, we're gonna need to have a jury make the determination of whether you truly abandoned it, because obviously you issued the lease before you abandoned it. And during the time, there was a time period where they said it was abandoned, that they were continuing to use it as a park, or at least part of it as a park. So there was a little bit of a dispute with regard to that issue. But again, if there's special legislative authority, or if you've abandoned it, or it's become unsuited for continued use, even if it's property that has been dedicated to the public for public use, you can alienate it under those circumstances. There is a provision in Title 11, it's 22-125. It was initially enacted in 77. There was an amendment in 1991 that specifically, the original language applied to universities. And it allows municipalities, political subdivisions to gift property. The 77 version was to universities. In 91, they added school districts within the municipality. So the provision in Title 11 allows municipalities to gift real estate to school districts within the municipality. And obviously gift means you're not getting any consideration, you're just giving it to them. And that's the specific text from that statute. Again, the municipal governing body may make gifts of any real estate belonging to the municipality to any school district which is located in the municipality. So if we were looking at the case from the Oklahoma Supreme Court when it talks about cannot be alienated without special legislative authority, this provision in Title 11 is special legislative authority that give the governing body of municipality to make a gift of any real estate belonging to the municipality to a school district within that municipality.
Does that include the structures that are on that property? Because the case before was a park and it had no structure.
Well, there really isn't a distinction, in my opinion, between park versus building. It's just, it's real estate.
Okay.
So there's some little nuances regarding this particular issue because, and we'll talk about those when we talk about the school gymnasium at Norman High that we gave to the school district, because the issue is the uniqueness of these are, they're totally surrounded by school property. So it's not like a freestanding building that, you know, there may be a market for, so to speak, to sell. This one is sort of, these are unique because arguably the only entity that would be interested in them would be the school district, because if I bought them, arguably I can't really be there during the day while school's in session, and there's no guarantee. I mean, we had a conversation about what if I purchased it, but I wanted to lease it back to the school to let them use it for recreational purposes. And part of that is the school doesn't have to lease from you. And if the school doesn't lease from you, it really isn't of any value to me because I can't lease it to anybody else. So, yeah.
Just for clarification, so are the schools leasing both buildings?
Okay, say that again, because,
They're not leasing either one of the facilities, it's just a joint use agreement.
yes.
There's actually no, or we couldn't find an agreement. There's no agreement that's ever existed. As far as we know, it's been a handshake agreement when the buildings were used that the school and the city would work together in the best interest of the public to use these buildings.
And then are we maintaining them or is it a partnership to maintain them?
We are 100% maintaining all of it.
Yeah,
So,
good to know.
yeah, the other issue we talked a little bit, I mentioned in this ML case has to do with the public use being abandoned is another reason that you can alienate property that's been dedicated to the public for public use. And there is a pretty good argument that we've abandoned those facilities for the most part. Again, our use for youth sports has been transferred to the Life Act, so we're not using those facilities for youth sports anymore. We are using them for summer and after school programs. Doesn't really require use of the entire center, but again, because we are regulated by DHS, You really can't have the public in there during those school camp hours. So it really isn't of any benefit to the public when we're using it for after-school and summer camp programs. All right. The wrench that gets thrown in this that makes this a little bit difficult has to do with the fact that those facilities were purchased with bond funds. We purchased those with bond funds. The bond amount that was approved in '74 was $750,000. And again, that's ordinance number 747366 that was approved on April 23rd, 1974. Under Oklahoma law, the use of bond funds is limited to the purpose for which the indebtedness was incurred. So you went to the electorate, they approved bond funds for construction of recreational facilities, so you had to use those bond funds for recreational facilities. And then this case, Protest of Reed, which is 1932, also says use of those funds also includes the proceeds of a sale. So if bond funds were approved, you constructed the facility with those funds, you subsequently sell the facility, you have to use those bond funds for the same purpose, or you have to deposit those in the sinking fund as a rebate to the taxpayers. And that's the way that that's supposed to be handled when you sell something that was purchased with bond funds. Essentially what that case says, an amount equal in value to the amount of all the indebtedness incurred by the municipality for the purchase, construction, and repair of the building must be either used for the original purpose or paid into the sinking fund to reimburse ad valorem property taxpayers. So that throws a little bit of a wrench into this particular proposed transfer because, again, they were purchased with bond funds. Now, these are depictions of the property that we own at Irving and Whittier. As you can see, we talked a little bit earlier about each of these facilities are totally surrounded by school district property, so there really isn't much use in terms for other potential purchasers. We did get a update of a appraisal that we did, and the appraiser, the first time he didn't take it into consideration, the second time he took into consideration, well, if you tried to sell these on the open market, what would the market be? And arguably, there really isn't a market. It's not an open market. Generally, an open market means a willing seller that doesn't have to sell and a willing buyer that doesn't have to purchase. But if you were to place for sale signs out in front of these structures, the question would be, who would come along and want to purchase that? Would there really be someone other than the school district that would want to purchase these particular areas of the school when there really wouldn't be much that they could do in terms of use?
So, Rick, before you go on, I'd like to point out too, we have, through this process, those green squares that he has up there are not exactly correct. I think about 8 to 10 years ago, we did a land exchange with the public schools, which included the tennis courts at both Irving and Whittier, exchanged for the property that was directly behind 12th Avenue, which was west of Eisenhower. It appears that even though both boards and council signed off on the transaction, nobody ever filed it with the Cleveland County Abstract. So when you go look at their website, it appears that that we own these properties and the school owns. When you go to the Cleveland County Abstract, it appears that we still own the properties as originally said, but we do have documents that say otherwise. So those green squares aren't exactly.
So our footprint would be a little bit smaller.
Yes, correct. We only own the building areas at this point.
And of course, the thought process is it's still totally surrounded by school district property, so that's the issue. In terms of this particular exchange, the parties do not anticipate converting the recreation centers into money. Meaning, when you're talking about the exchange of property, specifically with regard to public property, usually what you're looking for is consideration. I mean, we get something in exchange for something they give us. And legally, consideration can be measured by benefit to one party or forbearance, detrimental loss, or loss of responsibility assumed by the other party. So consideration doesn't always have to be the exchange of funds. It can be, again, forbearance, detriment, loss or responsibility assumed by the other party. And as Jason mentioned earlier, currently one of the things that's happening is we're responsible for all of the maintenance of those facilities. Did you ever figure out how much per year?
Yeah, so right now we're paying janitors and Mind you, we're only using one room in the rec center currently, but we're cleaning the whole building. It comes into, both of them together is about $30,000 a year, and then we kind of put a minimum cost to go along with our facility maintenance, which they provide everything from electrical work to HVAC and plumbing out there. And so we value that probably about $10,000 per center. So we're probably spending about $50,000 a year maintaining both Whittier and Irving together.
And of course, if these facilities were transferred to the school district, that is a responsibility that they would be assuming, which arguably is consideration with regard to this particular property transfer. There's an other issue with Whittier because apparently at some point in time there was a flood and the water apparently was dried up, but there wasn't any drying of the building, and we have subsequently determined that it has a lot of mold. We have gone through and we are in the process of remediating the mold, but we don't intend to replace the drywall and all that kind of stuff with regard to that particular facility. And that is another one of the responsibilities that the school district would be assuming if the property was transferred to them. They're gonna have to go through and remediate all that. And my understanding is there are a number of other upgrades that they wanna make. They have bond funds to be able to do that. The issue is they can't spend those bond funds for those purposes because they don't own the buildings. So if they own the buildings, then they would be able to use those bond funds to go forward with regard to those type of improvements. All right. I had another slide in here and apparently I didn't save it. It goes back to and talks about in 2020, we transferred the Norman High Gym to the school district. The gym was purchased, was constructed, the Norman High Gym was constructed with bond funds in 1952. My understanding is that's where we used to have council meetings. We had council meetings there initially. It was for that purposes. Obviously, over time, we moved all those functions to this location. The school district used it for basketball games and assemblies and things along those lines that the school district currently using Whittier and Irving for. And at some point in time, obviously, that particular facility became totally enclosed by school district property. And in 2020, for some very similar reasons, we decided to transfer that facility to the school district. At that time, there was a desire to, it needed a new roof. And the estimate was the roof was gonna cost them about $210,000. Again, that was used as the basis for consideration. We're not gonna have to replace the roof, they are. And our value in that particular agenda item was determined to be nominal because we didn't really use it. We had effectively abandoned the use of it. I think that narrative talked about the fact that the last function that we had in that gym before 2020 was we used to have karate classes in like 2017, and we had discontinued that. So we weren't using it for anything. And under those circumstances, that council found that it was appropriate to transfer that facility to the school so that they could go forward with using it as their primary gymnasium and then making those improvements with regard to the roof. So our position is rec centers can be alienated. I mean, we can alienate them either under 11 OS section 22-125 or based on the fact that we have effectively abandoned the use of them. Again, that's special legislative authority or the public use being abandoned under that Oklahoma case law. We believe that special legislative authority, the 11 OS section 22-125, gives this governing body or gives you the ability to actually gift those recreation centers to the school district. There's a little bit of a concern, and it kind of sort of has to do with the risk factor. There really aren't any cases that construe that provision that tell us whether we can or can't. I mean, there's one case that cites it, and it's factually totally distinguishable. So it really is an area, and I've talked to our bond counsel, we've gone back and forth about this issue, and what we talked about was just the level of risk. Yeah, is it possible that a court would read that statutory provision? Remember, it says any real estate. It doesn't say real estate except what you purchase bond funds. It says any real estate can be gifted to a school district by governing body of a municipality. So there is an argument that you could do that under 11 OS section 22-125. size. And then again, even if we believed that we couldn't, it would require us to proceed under those cases that talk about bond funds. We believe that our public use has been abandoned. We really don't use it as a recreation facility. We're really only using it for after-school programs and summer camps. We have talked with the school district. They're willing to allow us to continue that use by agreement at a very nominal cost. I mean, they see it as a benefit for them because a lot of the kids that are going directly from school, whose parents can't take them up, are just going over to the gym and participating in that after-school project. So obviously, it's a benefit to them to allow that use to be continued. And then, again, we don't anticipate converting a recreation center into money. Most of the cases that I've looked at that address the issue of bond funds, it was clearly that that facility was sold for some remuneration. And then the question became, what do you do with that? Here, we don't anticipate that. There's no issue there. And again, even if there was, we believe the consideration really involves the responsibility that NPS is assuming with regard to taking over those facilities for maintenance and operation. And if anybody has any questions.
If this were contested by anybody, who do we expect would be that
That's a
party?
good question. I don't know. I mean,
It is so unique with a school district inside your city limits that it's the same taxpayer.
Yeah.
And the same kiddos who benefit from the facility still benefit from the facility. We just don't have to maintain it anymore. It's hard to, I mean, this isn't a NIMBY thing. It's not a new development thing. Operationally, it will be exactly like it's going on today. It'll just have a different title on it and it'll get a new roof and paint and renovated, and we won't have to hit your budget with it. We noodled about who might we offend, and we can't come up with one.
The party that I would think could be offended would be someone who wanted to use the facility for reception or something, and the school district said no. And what we would have to have some sort of agreement with the school district is that, just like they do with their other facilities, they rent them out sometimes and then just make that available to the public. You know, they wouldn't advertise it, but if somebody came to them and said, you know, I want to have a baby shower there, is that okay? They'd say okay.
And that's just a line in a contract, isn't it?
Yeah, and a fee schedule that they already have.
Yeah.
And then Norman Public Schools already has bond money set aside for improvements to these facilities, assuming that they take ownership of them, then they can actually use that.
Yes, sir.
When you say a novel fee for the summer camps, what is that?
I say what?
A novel fee or nominal, sorry.
Yeah, we talked about $1 a year for rental of one room
Okay,
we didn't talk about a year, but he said that he doesn't see us ever ending that program, so
okay,
unless we
awesome.
wanted to.
Yeah, their students and parents benefit from our,
Yep.
of, you know, the availability of our.
And $1 is a typical fee on all of our operations, so.
All right, well, that sounds like it would save us, what, 50 grand a year? Well, minus a couple dollars.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do we take anything out of them? Do we take the plaques down or city stuff, I guess?
I guess that's a question. We do own chairs, we own a bunch of recreational equipment. I would assume that that sticks with us unless we come up with some kind of agreement. But yeah, I would think we would take the things that we own, either use them in another center or work with the school district to pay a small fee for them. I don't know if it's something that's permanent fixtures in there that we can't take with us.
Okay, and then I'd say if Norman Public Schools doesn't want to keep the plaques with how they were built and all that stuff, we should probably keep them.
Yeah.
Like a history thing or something.
Yeah.
I think it'd be cool.
I think it's a great idea.
Or even Councilmember Holman, maybe an additional plaque that, you know, commemorates,
Let's change
The change in
Yeah,
ownership.
that'd be cool. This is how they were built. And
yep,
And while we're doing the plaques, we should look at specifically Whittier naming it the Olson Center at Whittier.
Olson Center at Whittier.
Enshrine that steel case desk that
I
he's
still
got.
ask myself why I gave up that job. It was hot dogs and ping pong every single day.
or is that you? That's
Yeah.
Mecca.
Yeah.
We don't name parks after anybody that's living. So,
It's kind of a steep curve
We
there.
can wait a while though.
We can fix that.
Then you laid off the hot dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Could have been sooner or later.
Anything else that comes up as questions for Rick or about this topic?
Well, Council, we will agendize an action item for your consideration in an upcoming meeting, just depending on how long it takes the district council and the city attorney's office and all interested parties to approve it. And we'll see you again. Thank you.
Now we'll go back to item 1. Anthony's on deck. 4, discussion regarding the mid-year
Now,
budget.
the real fun is.
Yeah. Thank you, Rick. Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait,
Anthony has handouts.
Good. Little ones.
I use handouts
I was
because our
hoping
fund
you'd
summaries
have
don't show up on screen very well. So it's a lot of numbers in small font, but it's important. So this is the usual fund summary format that you're used to seeing in all of our budget presentations and budget documents. What has been updated here is that in column A that you see there, we have plugged in the audited fiscal year end 24 figures. I'm only honing in on 3 of the funds here, but remember that we have similar sort of a format in fund summary for every fund of the city. But these are kind of where the action is right now. So you see that we closed fiscal year 24 really close to where we estimated that we would. Factoring out down there on line 67, the encumbrances that were carried over into fiscal year 25, we started this fiscal year with $17.677 million, which is good. We are really close to being on budget on the revenue side, so I didn't change any of those figures right now. As we move forward in the budget process, we may make some adjustments there, particularly after we get the February sales and use tax in. But I haven't to date. I would draw your attention to line 22 and line 37. That is where the funds come in from the capital fund and go out for capital equipment purchases that are booked to the general fund. So those figures just kind of net each other out. No net impact of the bottom line. But you see there on line 33, the rapid growth in our expenditures for salary and benefits. That is because we have made some fairly aggressive wage increases over the last 2 fiscal years. We've added steps, we have given cost of living adjustments, and that is working itself through in some really aggressive cost increases for every fund of the city that has personnel. But again, the fund of the city that is most labor intensive, personnel intensive, is the general fund and the sanitation fund. Really not focusing in on the sanitation fund here. A couple of things I would draw your attention to again. On line 47, you see that we had a $1.4 million subsidy to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. This is in fiscal year 24. And we are estimating a $2.87 million subsidy to the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund in fiscal year 25 that we are in now. We had a $791,000 subsidy to the Transit Fund in fiscal year 24. We're estimating a $500,000 subsidy to the Transit Fund in fiscal year 25. And that is going to inflate pretty rapidly if we stay on the course that we are on. So as I'm going to be getting into these reds, these things I'm really concerned about, just remember that this is making an assumption that we stay on the course that we are on. It is our job as the city management, it is your job as the council and the fiduciaries of the city to make sure that we don't stay on the course that we're on. And as we move forward in the budget process, we'll be making some changes recommended to you that we do some things to make sure that we course correct, if you will. But the assumptions that we're making now, moving on down in column C on line 63, we're estimating that we will lose about $5 million this fiscal year. Expenditures outweighing revenues. And as you see, when we adopted the budget, we assumed on line 69 that we would have an excess operational reserve of about $10.6 million. And you'll recall that we have been kind of holding that excess reserve money in the fund balance in anticipation of the purchase of the Griffin Parkland and the Sutton Wilderness Parkland. And that has been council's direction for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. And we're still going under that. And as you know, the negotiations are ongoing and hopefully coming to a conclusion. So if Jason, man, if we, we kind of set aside $6 million for that. So if we spend that $6 million, just know that would be $6 million out of that $10.6 million, and it would carry forward in future fiscal years.
And as that is percolating, OMES, State of Oklahoma, sent us a draft purchase and sales agreement and said this is kind of the form and format for that transaction to take place. It had everything filled out except dollar amounts. So Rick's office got the opportunity to kind of plow into what the purchase and sales agreement looks like, and it could potentially be done with a quitclaim deed, title. There was no owner, there was no anybody prior to the State Department of Mental Health. So we think the transaction could conclude relatively quickly upon council's approval of the purchase and sale agreement, which we do anticipate this fiscal year. So we're confident we're going to get that purchase completed.
I am not confident in the $6 million though.
Right. Yeah. The question, we're waiting for the blank. They're supposed to
Waiting
give
for
us
the
a number.
blank to be filled in,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's the opportunity that we might spend less to purchase Griffin, which could pad us.
Yes.
We're worried about losing $5 million.
Yeah, it just saves our bottom line. They had originally talked about the entire ownership at 53, 54 million. And then they were published in a newspaper article saying, yeah, we'll be lucky to get 10 million out of all of it. So that's the appraisal we're waiting to see, because that means this would be less than 6.
Potentially 2, maybe. That would be lovely.
That would be great. Yeah. Now, to Councilmember Grant's point, if you look down there on line 65, the ending fund balance figure that you see of $12.5 million, it is the bottom line, okay? So if you took $6 million out of that, it really wouldn't impact on line 63, the net difference, how much you're taking in versus what you're spending. And that is the concern. It's on line 63. And look at where that number is going. In future fiscal years, we're losing $6.2 million in fiscal year 27, and $7.8 million in 28, and $10 million in 29, and $12 million in fiscal year ending 2030. That is where we need to course correct, and that's what we have to be concentrating on, and that number is driven by personnel costs.
So one of the things we talk about during the budget development process, and we kind of highlighted it in the development of the current year budget, how many positions were added versus how many were requested. And there were substantially more positions requested than funded. And that's the trend that you'll see continue until we're able to have some inflection on that particular trend. Even without adding positions, what we find are, a legislative change or a change in the pension funding formula for all the police departments in the state of Oklahoma, and our pension cost going to jump $400,000 July 1. And nothing's different in the world. We're not providing any new services. It's just going to be a lot more expensive to maintain the exact same number of police officers in the pension system we have today. So those are the forces and types of factors that work against us. And this is where, you know, we'll continue to shop local. Let's, let's do what we can do to make sure we're maintaining all of those fungible sales tax dollars.
I was gonna ask, do we see anything coming in the next 5 years that would spur spending at all? Like, I do know we approved some developments, who knows when they come online, but, you know, that Lowe's Target, that'll be pretty quick.
Part
Just
of
trying to see some like, maybe beacons on the horizon.
Yeah, that's where, again, Lowe's Target, but the Lowe's Target is right on the southern boundary of the city. So yes, you would think that we're going to get some net income from Noble and Purcell coming to that Lowe's and Target, whereas they might have otherwise gone to Ace Hardware or something in Noble. Now, again, that's a pretty cold and harsh reality. But we are in competition with our neighboring cities, just as we are in competition with Moore when Costco goes to Moore. So yes, there should be a net benefit, but just know that it is a net. How many of our shoppers that are going to Super Target on Robinson will go to Super Target on the south side now? And that is a net zero. We didn't gain anything there.
So the bridge over the Canadian to Newcastle, one of those potential opportunities is we've got a lot more shopping availability than they do in Newcastle. So it's really hard to put an estimate on what that impact may be, but we do expect net increase in our sales tax dollars, new money coming in from Newcastle that currently may, you know, shop in Yukon or.
And I'll say, I was counting the years towards 30. So you know, Oklahoma Municipal League has an initiative in 5 years to change how cities are funded. So I'm hearing when I go lobby legislature, I need to say, hey, those pensions are gonna cost us and we're not getting any more services. You guys want us to grow housing, but we gotta pay for infrastructure. So I'm just hearing reasons for legislature, if they want these things, for them to help us have some offset these costs.
I think if you were to look at county budgets, and look at what ad valorem, how steep that curve is, it's growing at a much more robust clip than sales tax. And our success in the world of development, even if it's just single-family residential, multifamily, what that does on the ad valorem side, it's a little easier, I think, on the budgeting side for county governments in Oklahoma right now. Their revenue growth is about double our clip.
Well, they can
But to the
mandate.
extent that the 5-year picture that you're looking at is the same as, it was like 1995 or something like that, when we did a revenue recommendation from the OML to change that. Just know that at the state legislative level, they're gonna run into the rural lobby. And there's a lot more rural legislators who want property taxes, period, low. They don't care about the city, you know?
Well, I was gonna say, maybe if you're retiring and still wanna work on this, they're looking for municipal finance folks who are experienced in these problems. But they were talking about a blend, a diverse funding source, not just property tax. And so it will be a 5-year education process to learn our codes, figure out what's working across the country, and then start that push to develop something, and then educate people, and then go to the legislature and say, hey, these are our needed changes.
And paint a real clear picture.
I mean, I feel like people are starting to recognize it when we get into the weeds on housing. So,
Well, on small towns staying alive.
yeah.
I mean, it's just hard for Godibo or Eric or somewhere like that. I'm sorry.
Got a gas station.
Exactly right, but I think the primary angle of that should be focused on diversified revenue sources to fund our public safety, because police and fire are the two biggest expenses in the general fund, the personnel and staffing. So being able to use other sources of revenue to pay for those two only maybe would be a huge benefit, right? And like I'm thinking about Noble, since they're not going to be getting sales tax from all those new houses they're building, because they're all going to be shopping in Norman, if Noble was able to get some property tax from those new houses to pay for the new police that they're going to have to hire to service those neighborhoods,
So you will
that would
recall.
seem like it'd be a
natural,
something that would
even
resonate
for the
with
little
rural
guys.
legislatures, but legislators, but I don't know.
There was
It's just for police and fire.
yeah, the establishment of public safety districts
Right.
in state legislature, and we thought, yeah, maybe the circle is bigger than city limits, depending on the level of service. You know, you pick your level of fire response, and right now we have the lowest ISO rating. Nobody responds better than the city of Norman. And here's what it costs. We can tell you exactly what that cost. As costs go up, the ability to establish, instead of a sales tax, a public safety sales tax increase, the ability to establish a public safety district, property owners benefit from great fire protection. Is that a better nexus than sales tax? There was a constitutional challenge to that piece of legislation. So through OML, the ability to work through, okay, what do we need to tweak in the establishment of a district and correct that constitutional issue is an effort well worth pursuing, because I think it does provide options and opportunities to just diversify.
Yeah, stable funding source for police officers and firefighter positions that isn't volatile with sales tax revenue.
That CAL FIRE would be the best example I can give of that. The state fire bunch, they're all state fire guys. And so you can move them anywhere you want to and use them when they're needed, so. I don't know if that works, or using California is a good idea.
Yeah, I know the county has a sheriff's department, but I don't think their budget's as big as Norman Police Department.
Nope.
Uh,
Would you like more patrol?
and they don't
Here's
have
how
a
we can
fire
pay for more
department to
patrol.
pay for either, so it's like, you know.
Anyway, Anthony, oh, I'm sorry, yes, ma'am.
So on the transfers for the PSST two fund, so what is that for? Is that for equipment? Is that for the?
All of the above. It's for everything related to public
Okay.
safety sales tax and its funding, so
So
it's,
salaries, equipment, okay.
yeah. We're gonna get to PSST fund here in a second, but yes, it's all of the above.
And I would just add to that, we're a little more lopsided than we were on the SROs. Like Norman Public Schools aren't paying us the, what was it, 500,000?
Yes.
So now,
They were to pay us about 750,000, and they're only paying us about 500,000.
yeah, so there's also that to put in perspective. You know, it'd be interesting if we get to that public safety study and look at the PSST again.
The next fund, we wanted to, I'll just, summarize the general fund by saying things are bad and that ain't good. Just, and we will be working as we move forward in the budget process to do some suggestions to course correct. The Net Revenue Stabilization Fund, better known as the Rainy Day Fund. You'll recall that the Rainy Day Fund ordinance requires council to make a determination at this mid-year budget review as to whether you want to make a deposit to the Rainy Day Fund or take money out of the Rainy Day Fund, which you never have. You have to maintain it at the minimum level, or could you keep it at its targeted level, or raise it to its maximum level. So what you see on Fund 11 here down at the bottom line, the 4% is the minimum. We are projecting at the end of this fiscal year in column C, we will exceed that minimum by $467,000 in the rainy day fund, so we're fine there. But we're about $615,000 short of the targeted level. You'll recall that last year, we were a little bit short of the targeted level, but council said, we'll just stay where we are. We'll not take money out of the general fund balance to bring it to its targeted level, and that's something for you to consider at this meeting.
And as Council Member Grant recognized, something to consider. We have a dollar amount in mind for the acquisition of Griffin and Sutton. And if it comes in under, council could say, oh, we saved a couple of bucks. Council could choose to hit the target if you saw fit. So just, we pay attention to that stuff all the time.
You can do it at any time.
Yep.
Okay.
The next fund and the last one that I wanted to concentrate on then at this meeting is the Public Safety Sales Tax Fund. You see that we actually ended fiscal year 24 with a positive fund balance in that fund of $2.6 million that carried forward into the beginning fund balance for this fiscal year. But we're projecting that money will be drawn down in this fiscal year. And we'll close this fiscal year with a ridiculously low fund balance of $221,000. And again, this fund is driven mainly by personnel. $11.7 million of that $12.9 million we project to come in from the sales tax is going straight back out to pay salaries and benefits for the police and fire personnel. We are projecting that we're gonna spend about $2.3 million this fiscal year on capital equipment. That's on line 23. That's a unusually high number. Again, that's the $2 million fire truck that we're actually expecting to spend this fiscal year. Then on line 26, and this is something that the city manager always wants to highlight, is the $2.3 million in debt service. We issued bonds back in 2016 to buy what was then the $1 million fire truck, and the communications system and the ECOC building. We pretty much done everything that we said we were going to do out of that bond issue. The proceeds have been spent down, but we will still be paying debt service for the next 2 fiscal years. But there in column E on line 26, you see that the last of that debt service payment will be made March 1st of 2027. And after that, we don't have any more debt service for those things. But also notice on line 23 and 24, we're not budgeting in any capital equipment or capital purchases. And we know that we are duty bound from the public safety sales tax ordinance to rebuild Fire Station 5 and move it back in town. So we know that we're going to have those expenditures. You are not going to have freed up money. Get that out of your mind. The public safety sales tax fund, look at the line 28, $15 million going out in fiscal year 28. $15 million coming in on line 8, and that's ignoring any capital equipment or capital expenditure purchases. The public safety sales tax fund does not cover the things that we said we were going to do. We knew that when it was passed. Get out of your mind that you're going to have $2.3 million freed up in 27. You are not. We have capital obligations that will be continuing after those original things we did in 2016 have been paid for.
In a new Fire Station 5, generically speaking, if we could pull that off for $7 million, that would be a bargain.
That's what they cost.
The last one I built in Hanford, it was about $5.5 million, and construction costs have gone nowhere.
In 2016, when we passed the ordinance, we estimated it would be $3.5 million, and yeah, fire chief most recently said 6. We'd be lucky if we can get it for 6.
Yeah, I would say it probably doesn't have to be, it seems like Fire Station 8 and 9 have a lot
A lot of gingerbread.
extra features that don't actually add any functionality to the buildings that probably aren't necessary on a new Station 5. So maybe they'll cost a little bit less than that one, but it looks like the debt, it's a little bit different, but it looks like the debt finance is right around the same amount that the subsidy is. So like basically the general fund is subsidy, if you could look at it that way, is subsidizing the debt of the financing debt. So when that goes away or it's paid off, then we would issue further debt to do the station because we won't have
That's
the
one
cash.
thing
on
we
hand.
could do,
We'll just
yes.
have to-
Yeah, we could just
Finance
wait a
it.
couple of years and, yeah, there's, how do we cash flow it is what it'll boil down to. And Mr. Francisco did educate me early on that when the debt service is paid off, the PSST sales tax revenue will just become a function of the general fund.
Right.
So it won't be segregated any longer, so.
Well, and there's also, when we talk about Fire Station 5, we also have been talking about 36th and Highway 9 area.
Destin's
Station for
Landing.
down there, if that's 11 or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
the number-
10. Yeah,
10.
that's-
Shouldn't have to
And
buy
I
any
mean,
property.
it gets scary.
Now, just remember, see, unlike Fire Station 5, which is just a relocation of existing station that doesn't add any personnel, if you add a new station, that's 30 people. And that's $1 million of ongoing costs inflating at 5% per year. So that building the station is the easy piece. The people to staff it is the hard piece.
And that's what the PSST originally included, was construction of 2 new fire stations and staffing for both of them. But yeah, and it looks like here, once the current projects we've already done are paid off in 2 years, and then we potentially take debt to do Fire Station 5, then it could be quite a while until the PSST officially folds in. If we do a debt, I mean, I don't know how long that would take to pay off for Fire Station 5.
Yeah, again,
Probably
the ordinance
5 to 10
says when
years.
the critical capital needs have been done. So if we issue debt and build Fire Station 5 sometime in 28,
And then once that was paid off.
wouldn't have to pay it off. The fire station is built.
Okay.
So the obligation would be a normal municipal authority obligation that could be ongoing. But yes, you could theoretically fold it into the general fund at that point.
When will we know where it should be built for sure?
The fire chief's got a pretty good idea. They do lots of modeling with response circles, but they do believe that Destin's Landing area will be the next additional fire station, just based on population growth. Where are all the people
Where
going
they've
to be
talked about
living?
Fire Station 5 moving was kind of like Highway 9 and 120th on that state-owned land where you're going into Lake Thunderbird State Park.
Right at the entrance, where
Yep.
we rode the horses.
Okay.
And then somewhere in that South Classen area, probably east of Classen, south of Highway 9 for that
Station
Fire
10.
Station 10.
Because the
Yeah,
Destin's Landing was one of the agreements is land for a fire station.
Yeah,
or
give us an acre and a
dedicated land
half.
for a fire station.
Well, I was gonna say, it sounds like it would even just take a couple of years to get to the point where you would be able to build it, just with, I mean, Dustin's Landing is not
do you
really
mean
built.
Station 10 or Station 5?
10.
What's the one over Dustin's Landing?
Yeah,
10?
that'll be 10. Yeah, and it'll, because the plat is approved, we're not seeing construction out there yet, so the bodies haven't
won't need it for a
materialized.
while.
Right.
So 5 would be the one, okay.
Yeah, but has that
The
area?
folks in Eagle Cliff would disagree.
Yeah, I'd say that Fire Station 3 is the one that serves that area down there, and it's on Constitution by Reeves Park, so it can get down there, but it's a little bit of a,
Yeah, you need good light on the streetlights. I wonder if we have the interrupters on those, Station 3.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor, if you want to.
So I just want to
Questions?
clarify, so any overtime expense is reported in the salaries line?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we have bodies specifically, their home account draws from this
Yeah,
fund.
just wondering that.
Yeah, and just know that that's not a small number.
Right, I was just about to ask, any idea what the percentage of the total salary expense is that overtime represents?
20%.
Christmas.
The average police officer makes about $15,000 a year in overtime.
Okay. And then, can we also get a copy of this? I'm having trouble reading through
Oh,
the
Yeah,
red
and
highlight.
I'm sorry.
We'll email it to you, and then you
Yeah,
can,
just
yeah,
email
make
it
it
to
as
me.
big on
Yeah,
your screen
or
as you want.
us.
So if we do have, we're looking into overtime and ways to cut back and save, obviously maybe hiring some more people because, more bodies, safer, on duty.
And again, this is just me, but historically speaking, adding more personnel does not reduce overtime costs. Remember that if you're the guy making that $15,000, you don't want to give up the $15,000 just because they added some more people. And so, again, historically speaking, and this has certainly been the case with the additional SROs, the overtime cost does not go down.
And this is nationwide. It's a phenomenon that every,
Is it a
City-
policy-making thing?
it,
Or
well,
like, hey, this is the policy, we wanna have fresh people on, you don't want overtired people. I mean, because that also results, I'll say on my end, hearing complaints about like less than professional behavior.
So if you see, if we added 10 more police officers, just as an example, they would position them in the shift to address the highest call volume. So it may be from 5 p.m. until 11 p.m. So anytime they make an arrest, it winds up with a court date that happens during the daytime. Well, now you have 10 more people arresting people at night when they got to go to court. That's overtime. So it becomes almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that the more work you're doing, 2/3 of it happen not during court hours. So if it's a daytime officer who makes an arrest, and he's working on a Saturday, when he comes into court, that's gonna wind up being overtime too. So it's just a, 24-hour a day operation for both police and fire, and you try to cram the business side of it into an 8-hour day. Then you got who's on vacation, who's on workers' comp, who's out on training,
Remember, overtime is time and a half. It's not just straight.
so if we could figure out the magic formula, we'll write a book.
So like hiring the 4 additional SROs does not reduce overtime, or were they
It
only,
has not.
were they only doing overtime because they were having to spend time at the elementaries or whatever?
That was part of it, and we tried to account for, well, they're gonna be at the football games on Friday nights, and they're gonna be at special events and that type of thing. And they still wind up calling in sick, going on vacation. And other people get overtime when they come in and fill in for people who are out on sick leave or out on vacation too, so.
$15,000 a year and 150 patrol officers that are available for duty right now. That's definitely a lot.
Yeah, and you just look at, what call volume, what that trend looks like, and response times in between calls versus proactive.
And so we account for what we think overtime is gonna be every year, so it's not like, oh, we have $2 million in overtime.
Yeah, well, we have a budgeted number and then we have an actual number, and usually the actual number is bigger than our budgeted number almost every year. And we figure out how to make it work in the overall appropriation for the general fund.
That doesn't seem very sustainable.
And that's the thing is, you said 10, if we chose 9 or 10 police officers coming in here, that's $9 million. If they're 300,000 to start with, as the first year, I mean, that's a heck of a bump.
Yeah, when you talk about the first year of outfitting vehicle, that was shocking when we had that conversation. We get the grant and holy smokes, it's a big pill to swallow. And cop cars used to cost 22,000 and now they're 90,000.
And
Say
they're not
40,
as,
but yeah.
and they're not as good quality
Not-
as they
yeah.
were. I mean,
You love those Crown Vics, don't you?
well,
They were-
I hear some feedback
they
about
were
how the new cars
tanks.
are just like everything's plastic, everything breaks on them all the time. They're being retired while we still, some of those new Ford SUVs have been retired and we still have Crown Victorias running because they're better made cars. And the new stuff just, I don't know, I feel like nothing new now is.
It's built-in obsolescence in the new stuff.
I know.
That's for cream.
I guess we ought to move on to item 3.
Yeah, I really didn't have much to add about the monthly financial reports. I'll respond to any questions that you have. We had a fairly good month of sales tax in January, which we were kind of anticipating where the major retailers made up for the past sins of underreporting their grocery sales tax. And we'll kind of continue to monitor, but we think we're on a pretty sustainable, or at least static, flat rate for sales tax growth this fiscal year.
Mr. Francisco's revenue projections were frighteningly accurate so far.
I hate it when I'm wrong.
They still have yet to pay us the money that they neglected to pay.
No, they have to
They
make
made
it
that
up. They have to.
So they've already done that?
A big chunk of it showed up in our January 8th distribution.
And how's use tax going?
What piece?
Use tax was actually down quite a bit
Grocery.
in this most recent month. Now
So
that
2
was
months ago, we were brick and mortar shopping, which was fascinating.
Yeah, now, the big thing about use tax in this current, receipt was related to Nextera. We're comparing to last year. And last year, Nextera, if, you know, Nextera is the big power lines and all of that, they bought all those power lines and deposited them in Norwood, and they had to pay use tax on that. That was a one-time thing, so where we had a lot, like a negative 10% in use tax, that was primarily related to Nextera. And we think we'll be on a 5% or so growth trend for the rest of the fiscal year.
By looking at the Norman unrestricted sales tax graph, 2019 to 2025, it looks like the January bar is the highest bar that we've had in the last 5 years. So that's the best sales tax month we've had in the last 5 years. And so an interesting situation we're in here where we've got really good sales tax revenue, and it's one of my questions is going to be on a dollar amount. The pre-2020 level we were bringing in per month was in the $5 to $6 million range, maybe, and now we're getting close to 10 million.
Yeah, we've had some 8s and some 1.9.
So I mean, we've increased our revenue. People are spending a lot in the last 5 years, but we're having some issues with how we're,
Yeah, that one, and
the costs are still rising faster, even though we're bringing in more revenue than we've ever brought in.
when council opted to discontinue the apportionment of sales tax dollars to UNP in that TIF, and I mean, we were having rough budget conversations about how we gonna close this deficit. Council took that action, whoop, we saw that jump, and it was like a $4 million new plateau for us in one budget cycle, and everybody got to exhale. But still, yeah, if you look at the growth trend, we're not trending up any faster. We just got a one-time kind of bump in
We've been maintaining that high level, which has been an interesting thing too, that it hasn't dipped back down to where the regular bar was before. But that, just this one's the most interesting graph to me every time, is how it looks over the span of 5 years and how it is increasing and people are buying and businesses are moving here and whatnot, but our expenses still continue to be an issue and grow faster. Mainly salaries and benefits is the issue.
And hopefully, January becomes a new trend and it's not just a one-time bump.
And what would because in 2022, we were seeing like 20% growth month over month type thing. Is that compared to 2019 to now, we would be like
20 to 21 was when that big bump happened, and that was pent up demand from COVID and inflation. And again, remember, for sales tax, inflation is good.
And boy, the cost of Pelotons, when everybody had to staycation and instead of spending vacation dollars out of town, they staycation, we bought a lot of exercise equipment and a lot of online sales. Fortunately, they closed that online sales tax loophole for us before COVID, or we'd have been in a much bigger hole.
And
so we got
even
lucky.
though inflation has declined over the last year or 2 years, we're still seeing
The
a high level of
prices,
spending.
consumer prices have stayed about where they were. There hasn't been a 15% growth in the last 2 years. It's been kind of stability, so.
And we think, when it comes to construction materials, even as inflation subsides, we're not gonna see a big reduction in materials. Now you light California on fire and the demand for construction materials is all gonna head that way. We think we might see another big price increase in construction materials, so.
In North Carolina.
Yep.
Everywhere that's being hit with natural disasters, natural or not, but, so like our 2019 baseline, or right there, and then right now, we're probably in the 20% above where we would have been 5 years ago. And
Yes.
as far as we're bringing in a lot more revenue than we were 5 years ago,
Yes.
but we're also growing our city's growing, we're growing our staff, we're trying to be
We're
competitive.
buying something in Griffin.
Inflation gets in there.
That's why we'll always say, preserve our general fund, and we fight mightily to make sure that happens.
All right.
Any other questions for Mr. Francisco?
I wasn't finding it super quick, but how is use tax trending?
It had been trending up until this January number. It had been growing,
It had been
month over
growing
month.
5%-ish for the fiscal year until January. And there was a 10% reduction in January. And again, that I think was related to 10% down from a really high month last year because of Nextera.
Gotcha. All right.
We are adjourned.
Try fast, you'll
Thank
make
you,
it.
sir.
Thank you.
Tip off in an hour. Go.
Thank you, Anthony.
You need lights and sirens, we can make that happen. It's supposed to be a great game,
My
so.
brother's got the tickets.